I spent hours on crypto Twitter, so you don't have to. Here's what's happening. The U.S. Senate's Agriculture Committee released its own draft bill focusing on what's known as market structure. I've also previously mentioned this as the Clarity Act. This is now the second draft legislation out of the Senate that the public has gotten to see with respect to market structure. That is, the second draft legislation focused on new rules of the road for blockchain technology and crypto markets. I've talked about a few of the interrelated issues that are at play in this market structure concept. There are things related to SEC versus CFTC authority. There are questions about how certain decentralized finance protocols or things like self-custody will be treated. There are questions about disclosure requirements for digital assets that wouldn't have existed before the world of blockchain. And of course, there's some debate around what or whether this legislation might touch on some of the provisions of the Genius Act. That is, rewards related to stablecoins. There's a lot at play here, but I think there are really two takeaways from this news. First, as usual, the US legislative process isn't some clear, clean calendar that always happens the way we imagine it. In fact, it's generally quite messy. There are a lot of parties involved. Even if you think just at the Senate specific level, there are two committees involved in this legislation. The road is long and there are a lot of steps. And there are many ways the process can get halted entirely. So of course, this is interesting. Crypto Twitter is discussing it and people are reading into the text of the legislation. But above all, we still don't know with any certainty what US legislation might look like or if there will be any at all. Second, my general read from Crypto Twitter was that people are a bit less interested in what the Senate Agriculture Committee has to say on this matter. The anticipation and debates around the Senate Banking Committee's actions are much more lively. Part of this is that some of the most controversial elements or things that particular lobbying groups care most about are within the purview of the Senate Banking Committee. The other piece is that this Senate Agriculture draft legislation is not bipartisan. At a moment in American politics where things feel intensely partisan, it's interesting to see how much focus there is on this legislation, if it happens at all, being bipartisan. Part of that is procedural and mechanical, but the other part is that people think the legislation will be more credible or durable for the long term if it comes from a bipartisan coalition. In any case, as I've said before, and as I'm sure I'll say again, there's a long road ahead for market structure or crypto-focused legislation here in 2026. It still may not happen at all, but news, lively discussion, and crypto Twitter attention is ongoing.